Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. While I'm talking about Ocasio-Cortez, might as well get all of these out the way now. Let me check my mic. Always check your mic. Hope everyone is doing okay. Guys, again, I'm still in pain. That hasn't changed since the last video, like 2 minutes ago. So this is probably going to be relatively short. But I did want to get a few of these out the way because I was incapacitated yesterday. Ocasio-Cortez, of course, won that race. And I think it was Dana Balter. There were a few people, Ben Jealous, people who would be considered lefties, won the race. The race I focused more so on was Ocasio-Cortez because I wanted Joe Crowley out that seat. I was calling him the Invisible Man because he ducked out on one of the debates that he was supposed to show up at and sent a surrogate. This was so hated that the New York Times even browbeat him for this particular one, wrapped his knuckles. And a day later, he ends up at a debate in which he roundly got dissected by Ocasio-Cortez. In fact, she dissected him twice. She dismembered him in the first one and dissected him in the second. But Crowley, being a boss, party boss, and in this case, being a boss in losing, or let's say a good guy in losing the race. He's losing well. He's losing well. His failure, he dedicated to Ocasio-Cortez. Not his failure per se, but the fact that she won and she beat him and she was awesome at it. Born to run. Joe Crowley.
This is by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. This is by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Out on the streets, a runaway American dream. Had not revived with the mansions of glory. Suicide machine. Smoke pages on the highway now. Don't you feel checking, stepping out over the night. Maybe this time there's a bolt in the back. It's a dead shot. It's a suicide rap. We gotta get out while we're young.
All right, that's all. I don't need to hear a huge amount of that. Good on Crowley for losing in a good way. Fair enough. Fair enough. There's something sweet about your opponent singing to his failure and to his loss. He's like, "You're born to run. This is for Ocasio-Cortez." As he cries as he sings the song. He's been there for like 30 years. Look, I want to give her props on this. She ran a hell of a race, and she was able to galvanize a lot of attention to that particular race. I want to talk about this more from the perspective of people who consider themselves on the left, whatever that means. Look, my fear here is one win is not a war, meaning a battle in a longer conflict and a longer struggle to try to get some kind of change in society. It's not the same thing as winning a war. Now, she may actually go to Congress on this, and more likely than not, she is going to go to Congress because, let's be honest, Crowley has a charisma of like a damp rag, and he was still able to essentially win like for 20 years or 30 years. We have an avatar, supposedly, of what we want as one representative in Congress. Other candidates who are on the left got massacred in many of these races. The Democratic Party right now is putting their thumb on the scale in certain races, even in races where some of the people won. They were intruding on those races as opposed to letting the grassroots choose. Oddly enough, it is somewhat of a policy of the Republican Party not to get involved in these races. Democrats probably should have heeded that warning. Look, I guess my point to this is, I don't want to get this impression that just because a lefty was able to beat Crowley in that one race, that is evidence that lefties can beat Democratic machine in all of these races. And granted, I don't necessarily think anybody made that argument. I just don't want people to believe that one race is a redeeming quality of the whole. Those things are very different from one another. The character of Ocasio-Cortez going into the Democratic Party is going to run up against friction like nobody else's business. It is a positive thing that people gave O'Connor shit when he came out for Crowley. It is a positive thing that people jumped on Ocasio when it was like, wait a minute, did you change your anti-war platform? And that's not just positive, necessary. It's necessary. I think, I could be wrong on this, but there's certain people who something drives in where they want the world to be a particular way. It is far easier to get things accomplished in Congress in Washington when you send somebody who's in that particular mode. But the people who they're interacting with, however, are not going to be in that mode. And those people are going to have to be bent or taken out. We are being assaulted all across the country, whether you want to talk about workers' rights from the Supreme Court, the things that they struck down. I have another one on that. Purely from the standpoint of just politics. This is a nice feature of an otherwise machine that functions in a different way. I say it that way. So, yes, it is great that she won this race. All accolades to her for this. That's an amazing run. And look, here's the other thing. The people who we're going up against, the Democratic Party, the lefties who are in this race, you must understand what they're up against. You have, it cuts against them. Like immediately upon getting into the race, you realize that in order for me to be effective in this race, I need mounds of cash. I need a lot of cash. How am I going to get that cash? Now you're running scorched earth screaming about capitalism being the problem. What capitalist is going to give you that? So you're probably not going to get it from companies and all this other stuff that Democrats, or from major donors. Let's say it that way. Or you're not going to get major donors on your side. You're going to have to do it through small ticket donations. Now, that's a good thing because in that sense, you're getting your money from the society itself. But the small ticket donations that you're getting is going to come from a society or from a group of people that have been beaten down by a certain economic system, that have been completely let down and lied to over and over and over again in the political dynamic going back for the last 20, 30 years. And you coming in saying you're going to do something different, and they're going to look at you and be like, why? Why do I believe you're going to do something different? And why am I going to separate myself from my hard-earned cash to give it to you for something that I don't believe you're going to do something different? That's not easy. You're going to have to get people to fork over their cash that don't believe in your political thing, or don't believe that anything is going to change based on you going into that office. Those are the people you're going to have to convince. The people who are completely disgusted with the process the way it is. Now, in her case, she was able to do it. Can they do it in other small town areas? I guess all I'm saying is understand the realities of the difficulties of lefties running in the races like this. Doesn't mean they can't do it. Doesn't mean they can't do it. So, congrats to Ocasio-Cortez. This is one item in an otherwise machine that's going in a different way. Last point. Right now, there's this feeling that the party is somehow changing based on what has been said. There's a clip where Bernie Sanders says that he believes that he won just based on the kind of Medicare for all in the Democratic Party. I think that's laughable. There are people in that picture who's like, it's a still shot. And so you can see people like cringing at what he's saying in this case. Here's the thing. You've gotten people to talk stuff up. You've made them better liars. You have people saying, yes, Medicare for all, that's great. Jobs program. Do you know Crowley himself came out for a jobs program, jobs guarantee. So you have people putting this stuff out, but they're putting it out with a Republican House, Senate, Supreme Court, and presidency. You could be as lefty as you want to be. That's like somebody wanting to get into a fight and he's like, hold me back, don't hold me back, don't hold me back. Well, if I wasn't being held back by this large group of people, I would hit you in your nose. And then people just let him go and he just kind of walks the other way. The question is, what do you do when you're in that office? You had 8 years of a presidency. Not to mention a section of that time. You had absolute power of the political apparatus. What do? And why should people believe that something like this is fundamentally changed when you're out of power and you can't do anything about it? We're powerless to do anything, but Lord knows we want to do stuff. And you have capitalists, Nancy Pelosi, with $100 million in the bank, saying the party is not going to socialism! Exclamation point. Look, all I'm saying is the machine is built in a particular way. And the idea that the machine is going to be changed, I'm skeptical. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean it's impossible, because at one point you had New Deal politics. And if we're being honest, it's somewhat recent political memory. I mean, Bill Clinton wasn't that far in advance. I mean, he was essentially grabbing ass, like 20 years ago, 20, 30 years ago. So it's possible to change. But do I look at this race? I look at this race as a satisfying victory in the same way I look at recycling. It feels good, but ultimately this is not going to change global warming. So, slightly different, but kind of the same, if that makes sense. One, it's not going to do it. There's going to be mass support and a lot more of these people getting in office. And it doesn't seem like this is just a wave where things are changing. So, I don't see it. Now, that being said, that doesn't necessarily mean that if in 2020 somebody who takes office is actually a real lefty and genuinely believes it, then at that point people like this is going to be fucking awesome and instrumental. But until then, the machine is pivoted in a different way, and if anything, Ocasio is literally running against the Democratic Party itself. So we'll see. I guess, look, my main point and the thesis of this is one battle is not the same thing as a war. And her getting in office should not give this impression to lefties that the Democratic Party is some venue, as it is currently structured, for change. So, which is my feeling that some of these people are going to get the perspective of. Ocasio will be another superdelegate for Sanders. Good. We won a battle, but not a war. Darren the Levy. Yeah, good. That's my point. We won a battle, not a war. And yeah, I'm not going to keep this one long either, because I don't want the point to get too scattered. It's a battle, and winning one is not indicative of the party being in that way or being in that direction. In the words of Nancy Pelosi herself, it just means the people in that district are that way, or at the very least was willing to step over the corpse of Crowley to get some change in the society. My question is, and I'll leave it at this. She ran a scorched earth lefty race. And if people were unabashed in running that way in those other districts, screaming that this guy's bought. I've said that so many times. On this channel, I've made this argument that if you're running a race, scream at the top of your lungs that I am not taking campaign finance donations. I am getting small ticket donations from you. That other guy is not. Who do you believe is going to represent your interests? That's a fucking effective argument. And that's the argument that she used on Crowley in both debates, entirely in this campaign, and she eviscerated him with this. Does that work in other parts of the country? I want to say yes, it does, but I have no idea. I don't know. That's how I feel, because I think human beings would prefer somebody who's being earnest with them as opposed to somebody who has ulterior motives in going about their affairs. It's a battle. It doesn't mean the party is your friend. And if anything, in a large part, who Ocasio was running against was the party itself. So, Patrick, good looking out. Thank you, Patrick. When you send the thing, leave a comment, Patrick. Matt West, it's like a peasant army slowly gaining a following, losing a bunch of battles, then winning a big one that would help them gain more peasants for the cause. Matt, yeah, I agree. But the catch is, if that peasant army is people joining the Democratic Party, is that a good thing? Like, if there's a blue wave only for that blue wave to be a bunch of corporatists, is that a good thing? You might get 3 lefties in. Understand, in an odd way, the capitalistic system works in kind of this way. It's bribes. It's, I'm going to be uber rich. I'm going to have $130 billion. Below me, I'm going to let somebody get maybe $2 million. That person is going to be absolutely a soldier in my favor because I gave him $2 million. Below that, they're going to be people with much less, maybe $80,000, $60,000. And they're going to be appreciative because they can see below them are people who are living in dirt poverty. This is kind of an oddly in a similar way. You have a Democratic Party that, for the most part, has put all of these centrist, I would call them right-wingers, in office, losing profusely for the last 6-7 years, and yet still saying this is the way it needs to go. We're the smart kids in the room. Every so often, a lefty gets in office, and they say, see, we're a big tent. I would make the point that's not really being indicative of a big tent. It's indicative of you have a two-party system where there's no party that actually just vociferously represents workers. You have this weird piecemeal thing where people like Ocasio has to go and function within the context of a machine that doesn't like Ocasio very much, and people like her very much. So, yeah, until there is new leadership in the Democratic Party, until many of these centrists fall out the way, until that party gets on board with certain baseline, bottom level, no person should go beyond a certain point policies, then I have nothing to do for it. My argument is still the same. Represent the people, or support the people who you believe will represent your interests. Everybody else, let them fall and burn away. Otherwise, nothing fundamentally changes. Why would anyone want to join a party that's demonstratively corrupt? Jay Carson. Here's the thing, Carson J. Somebody may look at Ocasio winning and say, hey, they're not all that bad. I'm saying, yes, they are pretty bad. Every so often, they just have a bright spot. There's a difference. Bernie 2020, Indo C. Look, if Sanders ran, I would vote for Sanders in a heartbeat. This is the first time in my lifetime, and again, I know I said I was going to end it on the last one, I ended here, that I've seen a public consciousness that was accruing around a certain frame of thought that is independent of the party itself. And it's either, to some degree, antagonistic of the party. Like in the same way that Democrats are antagonistic towards Republicans, you have this group that's become antagonistic towards the Democratic Party, even though they kind of fell out, or the Democratic Party kind of left them in their tracks as it moved to the right. Those are the people who I would argue got her elected. Like, those are the people who were galvanized into getting her elected. Now, the question becomes, are those people enough where, and here's another thing, run-of-the-mill Democrats, for the most part, agree with this stuff. The problem is, these politicians who are in office, run-of-the-mill Democrats, run-of-the-mill people. The problem is, how do you get elected in a system? Think about how her or somebody else had to get elected. They had to accrue a huge amount of money, a huge amount of cash in order to run. Who are you getting that money from? You have a public that is barely making ends meet. And as a public, half of it is service worker jobs and everything else. Barely making ends meet. Those people don't have time to go out to protest, especially if they may lose their jobs. And they're going to give up part of their scratch that they're using to make their ends meet to put into a political process, when they may even believe this person has no chance of winning, even if I believe everything that's coming out this person's mouth. That's not an easy scenario to run in. Part of the reason why you had all of these roving plutocrats who decided to run into the Democratic Party is because they could self-fund their campaign. And as such, Democrats love the fact that they could self-fund their campaign. But if you actually want to get anything accomplished, and you're actually a lefty, the catch of it is, you taking power, the Democrats would support you. I know that sounds strange, but that's one of those things of the Republican Party. Donald Trump ran, I'm trying to make a distinction between the corrupt at the top versus the average everyday person who, given a choice, would vote in your interest. I'm trying to make that distinction. You can see that in both parties. The difference with the Democratic Party is you're not supposed to be obsequious to cash in this way. You're just not. And unfortunately, the party just is. And I would argue that that is influencing many of the decisions that take place, that people who are cultural Democrats vote for. But at the same token, if you have somebody like Sanders putting up Medicare for all or everything, they would also vote for. They're cultural Democrats. Meaning the Hillary voter, if there was no Hillary, she would vote for the shit that Sanders was putting up. I think this is what probably part of the most aggravating thing to me. It's an awareness that, yes, we want to move further to the left. Any poll of the Democrats, not assholes in office, people, just run-of-the-mill people, shows that they are perfectly okay with moving to the left. They are okay with moving to the left. The party apparatus, not so much. So, I'm going to leave this here. Active shooter situation in Baltimore Sun paper in Annapolis. Check news feeds. I'll check that out now. See what's going on. All right, guys. I'm going to end this here. Thank you for showing up. Yes, I know I'm low energy today. I have a few more stories, but I'll see you in a few. Thanks, guys. If you enjoy the content, of course, share, like, subscribe, and Patreon. Thanks, guys. Oh, and by the way, Patrick, thank you very much, man. I appreciate it.